Welcome to the Get Good at Presenting podcast with Lee Jackson.
Nice. Something a little bit different today. Welcome to Get Good at Presenting, the podcast, with my very special guest. You can keep playing. I'm quite enjoying that. That's beautiful. It's like being on radio, isn't it? And now this special request. So my special guest today is one of my teachers. So this is Talk to Your Teacher. And this is my friend, Paul Silky Whi. I don't think I've ever called you Paul. I'll just work that out, Silky.
No, it sounds like my mum's annoyed at me when people call me Paul.
So this is Paul Silky Whi, and he has got a guitar with us. He is a musician, an international musician and comedian and comedy and humour teacher. So I looked at your website. I was amazed at all the places you've been, Silky. You've been all over the world, haven't you, doing your thing?
You've seen my set, so you know that I can't go back to places I've been before for a while.
Let me read out the list of where you've been. China, Kuwait, Dubai, Bahrain, Singapore, Malaysia, Cambodia, the Seychelles, Indonesia, Norway, Sweden, Bolton, the USA, the Philippines, Kosovo, the Falkland Islands, Bahrain, Australia, all over Europe, and from the Alps to the Luxembourg.
Yeah, you said Bahrain twice, so don't big me up.
I did notice that quite a few places you have visited, Silky, they do seem to be war zones. I didn't know whether that was related to your visit.
I don't know, but I mean, you can't always please everyone, can you?
So we're going to talk a little bit today about humour. It's always one of my favourite subjects. I've had John Archer on here. I think we've had Jeremy Nicholas talking about humour. But it's one of the most important things. When I'm coaching somebody, when I'm helping someone to be a better presenter, I obviously tell them never to tell a joke because that can divide an audience. But I try to teach them how to find humor, how to become funny in lots of different ways. And I thought, where can I go? I'll tell you what, I'll ask Paul Silky Whi to chat to us because I'm trying to work this out this morning, Paul. I have done your comedy course and I've done your comedy improv course and your advanced improv course, which I think, is there another one? I think I've done at least 3 courses with you.
Well, since lockdown kind of stopped the comedy circuit, I've been teaching guitar online as well. So obviously, I mean, until you take up the guitar, then that's not open to you.
Well, that's lockdown for you. No, with the guitar, I learned, I think E minor was the only chord I learned because it's the easiest one to do.
Yeah, it's a pretty good chord as well.
It's a kind of a chord, isn't it? It's a beautiful chord.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about the guitar compared to, say, the piano is there's lots of different places to play the same note. So you've got an E minor, and you can play that E there, or you can play it there, or you can play it there. Whereas on the piano, you can only play one note, one place. So I like having the versatility of the piano.
The flexibility. I love that.
Yeah. Piano's dead easy to carry as well.
So, Silky, tell us about your. How did you get into being funny? You know, were you a musician first, or were you a comedian first? Which way around was it?
I think I've always enjoyed making people laugh, so I was more formally a musician before I was a stand-up comedian. In that I was playing guitar and stuff when I was about 16. I'd had some classical lessons when I was much younger, but I've been, a kind of guitarist since my mid-teenage years. And then the comedy came later when I was at university. I think you're right about how humour helps in presenting. Yeah, trying to do jokes is a difficult path because if people are expecting jokes, then they can mark each joke as a kind of pass or a fail. Whereas if you're being warm and humour naturally comes out of that situation, then it's not as if they're waiting for you to crack another zinger. Because that is the kind of the Chandler Bing from Friends thing, that if you're always doing that funny to show off rather than funny to bring people together, people won't want to talk after you've told a joke because it's quite a commanding thing.
Chandler Bing is perfect. I mean, Friends has just been on a loop in our house for the last 25 years, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember that joke of someone said, Friends is no longer on Channel 4, Channel 4 is now closing down because it was like that's all they played for about 4 years.
Utter ubiquity.
Yeah.
But when you have kind of, if you've got someone who wants to be the centre of attention, that's different from wanting to be a humorous kind of performer or a humorous speaker. Because, I mean, a kid having a tantrum wants to be the centre of attention, but no one really wants to be around them.
That's beautifully put, yeah.
I'm good at the analogies.
I'm going to draw some of them out of you, Silk. So when I first came on your comedy course, that was the one I went first. I think we talked a few times before. I'd seen you do a couple of gigs. I was, as you say, a repeat offender. I came back for more.
Yes.
And I thought, well, where do I go as a professional speaker to push myself? I'm part of the PSA. I work with other speakers. I obviously read and learn from other speakers. But where do I go to push myself? And I thought, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do stand-up comedy.
Go up to the dark side of professional speaking.
Because it is a dark side. And it's not only is it the dark side it can be, but actually it's really stressful. And I often joke that, comedy is like speaking on speed. It's like 20 times faster. You've got to be on it. You're looking for a laugh every 20 seconds or whatever. And that is pretty hardcore. But
that's one of the takeaways from my course.
So I came on your course. And I thought I'll push myself. It's 6 Monday evenings, I think it was, wasn't it? 6 Monday evenings in a row or something like that, with a gig at the end of it, a genuine stand-up gig with, it's mainly us lot in the audience, but there was some paying public there as well that sort of turned up, and it was a little bit scary. And I remember I came in the course, and like any course, I came with a notepad, with a notebook, started to take some notes, and then I realized that isn't the kind of course that this is.
No, you don't get credits towards your GCSEs.
I know, so I felt like a right geek. I'll just put my notepad down now. And,
no, not at all.
But after you'd done the initial bit, which was how to pick up a microphone, I think that was the first 20 minutes.
You get that out of the way, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. It's like, the comedians always move the mic stand behind them. That's like a thing. You taught that. But then I suddenly realized what you were doing, and this is why I wanted to interview you today. You weren't telling people how to tell jokes. And I think of the, 12 people on the course or whatever, I think there was only one guy that tried to do gags.
Yeah.
Everybody else was just being naturally funny. And I noticed what you were doing. You were drawing the funny out of people.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that, because you weren't saying, you might have mentioned how to write a joke, but it wasn't like, here's a Jimmy Carr joke, set up, we're going one direction. Oh no, we're going a different direction. That's comedy. You didn't teach much of that. You were just drawing people out. So explain, because I think speakers listening to this would love that. How do you draw out the funny in people?
Well, if you teach people to write jokes, it's a useful talent if you're going to be telling jokes. And for everything else, it's not that useful a talent. It's like teaching people to write on a Post-it note. It's got a kind of limited use. Whereas if you can teach people to find in themselves what they want to say and also how they can best say it, that's for them to explore. Rather than teaching people in a kind of formal setting, I'm the teacher, you are the students in a classroom, that doesn't really work. Unless you're trying to ram some information in, and not everyone's going to learn that way. So it's simpler for me to create a space where people can come out of themselves at their own pace, but with a support group of other people who are doing precisely the same thing. There's an informality to it where I don't push people into doing things. They've given me some money, which gives me, basically they've given themselves the permission to tit around, to be playful, to explore, to try stuff. And that's the admission fee. Because I could say to them, the comedy course is free, come along. But that wouldn't work. When you pay attention because you're invested in it. It's the same reason if you go to a free gig, it might be an open mic night for music or poetry or stand-up comedy. You're not really invested in it because it's free. I mean, you've made the effort to go there, like an art gallery or a museum. It's free to get into. You've made the effort to go there. But what you get out of it will be refined if you've put more into it.
And I think there's something about the kind of 6 sessions as well, because there's always looming is the kind of gig at the end. But throughout the course, you were playing that down all the time. You were just like, oh, I just wanted to chat about stuff and, 3 to 5 minutes or whatever, just chat and just make it happen. Whereas people were coming in really panicking on that first week. I could tell they were panicking about that final gig already. And you spent the whole time sort of saying, oh, well, we'll just be funny. And I think that for me, there was something about this is what coaching comes in, I guess. There's something about the regular thing. So going there every week for 6 weeks and then have that final gig. There was something about it. It was a builder. It was building up. It was building up. People ring me up or they email me and they want me to give them like one pearl of wisdom for them to become a great speaker. And I'm like, it's not how it works. You've got to keep coming.
If you want a shortcut, you don't deserve it.
Wow.
It's as simple as that. It's really as simple as that. And the other thing is when you say it's 6 weeks, it is 6 Monday nights, or it was 6 Monday nights with a graduation show on the 7th Monday night normally. And I was a bit sneaky about that. And I've just started reading a book, The Habits of a Happy Brain. And in that, it's talking about how to kind of rewire your thinking. So the reward chemicals in your brain, the dopamine, the serotonin, the endorphins, cortisol to a certain extent, it will take 45 days to form that new habit. So if you do 6 weeks of Mondays and then a show on the 7th Monday, that's 49 days. So if I get people into the habit of thinking differently on a daily basis over 6 weeks, by the time they come to the graduation show, they've formed a new habit, which isn't to find it terrifying to be on stage. All you're doing is having a slightly one-sided conversation, and everyone's had a conversation.
Yeah.
So the fact that you've got lights pointed at you and a microphone in your hand is neither here nor there, because you've spent hours and hours in the company of relative strangers, making them into new friends by virtue of everyone doing the same thing. Everyone wanting the same result, which is what society wants as a larger thing. People, by and large, want you to succeed. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I mean, no, unless there's a stag do in the audience for you as a comedian, most people want you to be funny, right? They don't want you to die because they're sat there thinking, please let this person be funny. And same with speakers. I always say with speakers, you've got to, no one, if you're at a business conference all day, they don't want you to be bad. They're just willing that you'll be good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the thing with the stand-up comedy analogy, when you say if there's a stag do in, I mean, the stag do, if they are too drunk to care, and they paid for the whole weekend package 6 months in advance, then they don't feel like they're invested in any way. But in most situations, unless they're utterly wasted, you could say to a stag do, let's have a good time. And people will be more invested in having a good time than having a horrible time or having conflict.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that sort of audience is vanishingly rare, or was in the before times. Certain sorts of clubs, and there's certain sorts of clubs, by and large, collapsed because that was the audience they were trying to attract. So the better clubs succeeded because they were welcoming. And you'd go there with your girlfriend or husband or your mum and dad if you're of the right age, and everyone would just go and laugh together rather than apart.
Yeah. The one or two times, I won't go into the names, but when I've been to a more corporate type comedy club, you were kind of shoveled in there. You seemed, oh, this is quite great. And then, after an hour and 10 minutes, you were shoved back out again for the next lot to come in. And it was like you were just in some kind of, you're on some kind of conveyor belt. Do you know what I mean? And it was, whereas your shows, you've done some local ones here in Leeds, and they're just like, yeah, if you need to go and get a drink, work your way in. We'll start roughly about here. They're a much more community feel. Have you always had that sort of community flavour?
Because it makes it more welcoming. It's what you were saying before about kind of in a corporate environment where people don't want you to be bad. That's because they've invested their time in being there.
Yeah.
But the instant you put in a little touch of humour that just says, I'm here too, I don't want this to be shite either,
Mm.
an audience will respond to that, and just you'll see them just loosen up a bit and go, oh, he's actually here, he's present. He or she as a presenter is present in the room.
Yeah. One of my little bugbears about certain speakers is when I see someone do their usual shtick. So in my industry, I mean, you don't know my industry particularly well, but there is people who've done the same talk for 25 years. Mm-hmm. They've got a 45-minute talk, and they know that, I wink at this point and I pause at this point and I do this, but it has often no relation to the audience.
Yeah.
And so that they do it, and then they're usually pushed off stage, or their manager takes them away and they get in a car, they move on to the next one. They do 3 of those a day, and they might earn some serious money doing that. But honestly, doing the same 45 minutes, like a vaudeville act from the 1920s, is just, whereas everything I've seen you do, you're including the audience. You're building, as Ken Dodd says, you're building that bridge from the stage to the audience.
Yeah, you have to include the people who are there. Otherwise, I have a similar bugbear in that I've seen comedians, and it's like they have a rucksack and they carry the rucksack with them wherever they go. And at every opportunity, they will take out of the rucksack a really heavy, polished stone the size of a bowling ball. And they'll show people this stone and say, this used to be a big rock, but I've chipped bits off it and I've polished it, and it's really heavy, but I've made it really shiny now. Look, you can see your face in it. And they just put it on the stage, and people look at it for 20 minutes or half an hour. And then at the end of that time, they put it back in the rucksack and depart, carrying the heavy weight of this bowling ball, this polished rock with them. And the rock doesn't change because they're happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always this weight to carry. Whereas if you see it like oxygen, you could walk into a room and there'll be oxygen there. There are people in the room and they're breathing the same oxygen. So rather than carrying this heavy weight around with you, you've got all of your experiences to inform what you want to say, all of their experiences which inform how they'll receive what you want to say. And it's an interplay.
So when you've done the sort of comedy club circuit, which I guess you've been in and out of that over the years, did you meet the same people again and again doing the same 15 minutes?
Fewer and fewer as the circuit changed. If you were doing that, people had seen your set and there was no surprise there.
Oh, okay.
So it's one thing. I mean, in comedy, you get paid for consistency.
Yeah.
You arrive, and if you make the audience laugh, that's good. That's good. If you're punctual, if you're not a sex pest, if you're a nice person to spend time in the company of, well done. But also, you have to have some sort of evolution. I had an interview with Eddie Izzard. I think it was on the Rule of Three podcast, where he was talking about some people had a set that became like a hymn or like a prayer, like the Hail Mary or an Our Father. It lost all the meaning of the words because it was just this thing that they'd learnt and repeated, and it set around them like a shell.
Gosh.
And that's, again, a really lovely analogy. I mean, I'm not spiritual myself. I know that you're very spiritual. And I know that the way you experience religion isn't to go to the Vatican and go, oh, there's tons of God here. It's not. There's tons of the shell. There's tons of the practice, but none of the raw flame of it. That's the sort of thing that you have that passion for it, be it football or be it comedy or be it crochet. It could be like Ellen Reid's maximum cross-stitch power hour, but whatever it is, if you just go, okay, it starts at 9 p.m, it finishes at 9:45 p.m, there's a 5-minute interval, and that's what we do, when we do it, how we do it.
Yeah. It
loses all of its life.
That's great.
I think the one thing that turned me off religion was going every Sunday.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Why? All these people that I know from the community can be weapons-grade bellends, just like everyone. But then they go to this place on a particular day, and all of a sudden that's where Holy happens. No, bollocks to that.
Yeah, interesting. I have a faith, but I wouldn't call myself religious. I think that's the distinction.
Yeah.
Because religion is a man or woman made thing to try and reach you to get near a God. And of course, it's that just isn't my thing. But that isn't the subject of the podcast, so we better not get too diverted from that, because otherwise we'll go on. Because we had a long walk in the park a few weeks ago.
Oh, we did,
and I think we talked about everything in about an hour and a half. It was fantastic. I loved it. So you've done the circuit, you've done your own gigs, you've done community gigs, you've done Glastonbury, haven't you? You've done some big festivals. Because a lot of speakers listening to this, they'll be in a training room with 12 people. And then the next thing they might, like, it's just a weird thing. Like with my job, I was training 12 people last week. And then the day after, I was doing a talk with 220 people.
Yeah.
I mean, it was online, but it was still 220 people. So how do you make that progression from that little gig to suddenly playing a larger tent at Glastonbury or something like that?
Move around a bit more. If there's 12 people, then they can all see you. If there's 200 people, then there's going to be some who are further back. But you can fill most rooms with force of personality. Still is a comic called Ivor Dembina, who's kind of an old Jewish guy based down in London. And Dembina's law of comedy, I covered this when we did the course. Dembina's law is, if it's going badly, get off. If it's going well, get off.
Wow.
Be finite, because it needn't go on and on and on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
You have a space to fill and a time to fill. Know what you're after, the result being, be clear on your priorities. And say, okay, I've got this story I'd like to tell, maybe a couple of jokes that I'd like to tell. I want to play these 3 songs or what have you. But you try and reach out to the far corners of the room. Don't play to the front row. Don't play to the gallery. Play to everyone. And try and bring all these people together, because they've chosen to be there, and they will never be that audience ever again. They will never be those people in that room ever again. If there's 12 of them there, they might be gathered together in another room or the same room in a year's time. But then and there, it's magic and special, because in a year's time or in a day's time, what's going on in their own lives will have changed. They won't be the same people. There's that thing of the kind of the river is never the same twice, because it's always flowing and moving.
And of course, this year, I mean, we at time of recording, this is late January 2021, but if we cast our mind back 11 months, you probably did your last gigs in February 2020.
Yeah.
Did you ever think in February 2020 that you wouldn't be gigging for another year or more?
I feared it. I'd managed to do a few physical gigs in the various different tiers over the kind of the first kind of 10 months. Kind of, yeah.
Was that kind of over the summer, after the first lockdown, over the summer, was it?
Summer, and some kind of through the autumn into the early winter. I didn't think it would be as slow as this.
Yeah.
But, I mean, without taking it too politically, I think we've been very badly led by people who were hand-selected on a single issue, and now another issue has come along. And all of a sudden, the people who wanted one thing have realised they've got to deal with taking the bins out, making sure school children aren't hungry. And they're just not equipped to do, because they've been chosen for one thing. So I do anticipate it taking a long time to come back.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, there's a lot of stuff that used to go on as normal, which I don't think should come back.
All right. Great. Any, I mean, you might not want to mention names. Anything specific that you think you don't want to come back?
There's a profundity of inequality, which is...
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at kind of Scandinavian countries, I think it's Finland where there's a legal limit on how many times the salary of the least and best paid employees in a company, I think it's like 15 times. As the head of a company, you can only earn 15 times more than the cleaner. So along those lines.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas we've got to the stage where the 10 most wealthy individuals have exceeded half the money, and that's not just allowed to happen, but is kind of somehow celebrated. Whoa, no.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, in my industry as well, I mean, one of the things that I, do fight against a little bit sometimes is, I've spent a lot of time talking to people talk about success.
Yeah.
So, I will help people to be more successful, but you have to really define success.
Yeah,
and when you scratch under the surface, people often mean just making more money. And it's such a shallow way of thinking that. Because I've met loads of millionaires over the years, and there's only two, not loads and loads. I've met, I don't know, probably at least a dozen millionaires, probably not without knowing some of them. And only two of them that I've known were really nice guys. And the rest of them, I'll just think, oh, yeah, you're a little bit odd.
It's a very diplomatic way of phrasing grasping and weird.
But, the fact is that some people, step on other people to make loads of money.
Yeah.
Some people do all that stuff. And so, you've got to define what success actually is. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's an interesting one.
I think I'm very fortunate in that regard, in that I do feel like I'm the luckiest man alive. Not because I'm particularly financially wealthy, but my security and my kind of sense of self-worth don't come from having tons and tons and tons of money. They come from the fact that I know contentment. And I know that contentment's quite an easy thing to obtain, and money's not the way marker. It doesn't hurt, but knowing what enough.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Zig Ziglar that says it is fairly close to oxygen for survival, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to obsess. I'm in business. I make profit. I make money but ultimately, like my good friend Peter Roper says, ultimately everyone's just trying to fill the fridge. And I think what this pandemic has helped us understand is people just want to fill the fridge. So you hear of comedians who are working as postal workers, or they're doing a night shift at Tesco's, and whatever they do, and they're still trying out comedy. I go to a new comedy night every week, the Sarah Millican one. Yeah, it's great, man. I've been nearly every week of lockdown. It's just a staple in my week now. It's great. And there's big stars there and there's people you'd not heard of, but they're all just trying stuff out because they know that even if, and some of them do say, I'm a postal worker or a porter in a hospital, but they're still working on their craft for when it does properly come back. And that's the people who are really in it for the long term, who want to craft it, because there's that kind of, I guess I'm getting on to what I've been quite impressed with you, because when we went for a walk a few weeks back, it's you. You actually started saying how you structure your day for creativity. And I know you've probably got your moments and you procrastinate and get up late like everyone does at times. But
I've alphabetized the garage.
Yes, let's put all my DVDs in alphabetical order, even though I've not not used a DVD for about 4 years. But,
order.
So tell us about, because being a speaker and presenter, that's a creative industry. So how are you in lockdown, where for a while your work disappeared? How did you keep a structure of creativity, Silky?
Set an alarm. So my alarm goes off a little bit before 7 every morning, and by and large I get up, I have a cold shower and then run it onto hot. I've got a shower that takes maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute for the water to run hot. So I just get in, turn the shower on. Oof. You say oof, but in that kind of little window where I see how many swear words I can remember, I just remember how lucky I am to have running water, and I can drink the water. It's not going to give me the blinding shit, so I'll gravy myself inside out. And whatever happens with Brexit or whatever happens with this, that, and the other, it's unlikely that here in the UK that water's going to not come out the taps. And regardless of where you're on the political spectrum, that is a really fortunate thing. So if I can get the perspective starting the day, I get out of bed, I make the bed, so I'm getting into a made bed. I've achieved something before I've put my slippers on. And then the cold shower reminds me that I'd live in a country where there's water in the tap, so I don't have to walk anywhere for something that cattle defecate in. I've got fresh water available. So by the time the water gets hot and I get clean, I'm getting really complacent. So then I kind of turn it on to cold again, hose myself down with cold water, and do that all in 3 minutes to try and save water. And then think, okay, what do I need to do today? It's friend Laurie Whiteley that you might remember through the course.
Yes.
What must it have? What can it have? And what won't it have? So like today, I've got to send out to my mailing list.
Yeah.
So I've got the list of things that are going to be on the mailing list, what it must have, what it can have, and what it won't have. And then I kind of structure it a little bit. I've got some, as you can see that, well, that's kind of the week broken up into a fortnight and then morning, afternoon, evening. Yeah. So I just kind of try and keep a little idea of what I'm doing and when.
Yeah.
And then there's some stuff which is kind of small ticket items, like if I put on the washing machine in the morning, by lunchtime, it'll be done. And that can be working in the background.
Yeah. So
I don't think I achieve a great deal. I don't think that I'm organised at all. So you saying that is really flattering me, but I'm thinking, this guy's drunk.
this guy knows nothing about me. No. I mean, partly when speakers and comedians, whenever someone is on stage, they're a bigger version of themselves, right? And that's a good thing that I teach. So, you're funnier, your expressions are bigger, you're a bigger version of yourself. But there's quite a lot of comedians that they give across that impression that they're always drunk, they never get up, they're completely procrastinate, their relationships and their life is in tatters.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether that's just an exaggeration of their real self or whether...
For some of them, it's perfectly true, but for some of them, it's a very carefully honed character.
Yeah.
Born out of maybe a lost weekend or a lost year or a lost decade where they can remember all that and play off it.
Yeah.
As I'm kind of learning more and more music, like I kind of took up the piano a few years ago and I'd never learned to read music before. So that's something that's coming in. It all feeds into the whole process. But there was a thing I read in a book about guitar playing, which is music is just a fancy way of going from one silence to another.
Yeah.
And that applies to all writing, all speech, be it presenting, be it comedy, be it acting. I think I like that because it gives you a kind of less is more approach rather than just blah, 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 flapping your jaw.
Yeah, less is more is a great thing. And I love, what inexperienced speakers do is they never pause. Because if you're anxious, you keep talking, don't you?
Yeah.
That's what you do. To pause requires self-confidence. To pause, to stop, to reflect to the audience, to do a cheeky wink to the crowd or whatever. That all takes...
Oi, oi.
Oi, cheeky wink. No, but that all takes self-confidence that you're comfortable enough in your own skin to just pause. I mean, what I mean by a cheeky wink, I realized that you were doing stand-up comedy. You are going to look for a laugh every 20, 30 seconds. But that laugh can just be you pulling a funny face. It doesn't have to be a gag.
I'll dispute the 20, 30 seconds because...
All right, go on then.
I'd never say I'm kind of the best comedian out there, but in my price range...
Which is very expensive, by the way.
I'm available. I think you can be bang, 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 really, really funny. And even the comedians who are kind of relentless gag machines, your Tim Vines, your Gary Delaney's, your kind of Mitch Hedbergs, they would adapt that process to have a very different pace. So some of them would be really rapid fire. But even then, even your kind of your Jimmy Carr's, the one-liners, they realised that having that rate is all very well, but people will switch off because there's no light and shade, there's no dynamic to it. And if you put in the dynamics...
Have you ever gone through your DVD and worked out what your gag rate is, laugh rate? Have you ever worked that out?
No. because I know that there are some things where it is pretty gag heavy and some things where it's not, but it's a textural thing. And to me, it's more important to be interesting than hilarious consistently. Because if you're consistently hilarious, then, oh, that's great. But people aren't always interested in blah, 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 blah. If you can put something in and they go, oh, I didn't notice that the last time I watched it. Or, hey, that's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'd see a difference between a stand-up comic and a stand-up comedian. A stand-up comic is just a product, and you wouldn't want to see them twice, because the second time you saw them, realised that it was pretty much the same as the first time.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And some of the older guys were probably like that. I mean, I talk about Ken Dodd in one of my presentation skills. I was a big Ken Dodd fan, saw him 3 or 4 times, met him the year before he died. I was really privileged to see him. Mm-hmm. But when you go see Ken Dodd, you saw Ken Dodd, and Ken Dodd was always Ken Dodd. And it, apart from the acts in between and the Diddy men or the Diddy people or whatever, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was just a legend, so you went to see him. But if you see that with someone else, you wouldn't want to. You couldn't go and see Tim Vine, who I love, and Gary Delaney, who I think is great as well. You couldn't see Tim Vine, Gary Delaney, Stephen Wright, and a few others, all the one-liners. You couldn't see them all in one night, because it'd actually be a really miserable night, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I remember my mum saying that when she was younger, she went to see Ken Dodd playing Malvolio at the theatre in Liverpool.
Yeah.
And said that he was amazing for the restraint that he was putting into it. He was playing Shakespeare, like Lenny Henry playing Othello. It's a different thing to making people laugh, but you can command that attention. Or you can just do what you do and people's attention will fall to you because you're worthy of their attention.
I went to see Lenny Henry. I met Lenny Henry as well. I went to see him sort of in his heyday, late 80s, early 90s, I guess. But when he went kind of serious, in my head, I'm like, oh, he's gone very serious now. When he started doing Othello, I'd be like, if I'd gone to watch that, I'd be just waiting for him to turn into Theophilus P. Wildebeest at any moment. You know what I mean? I'd be thinking, when's it gonna? And so I don't think I'd enjoy it. I'd be too stressed out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the thing is, if you watch an actor and they happen to be funny in that role, then it's just that they've got range.
Yeah.
Stand-up comedy is one of those things that if you get good at it, you are not being emotionally manipulative, but you are in charge of the roller coaster of emotions that the people in front of you are feeling. And you're tending towards making them laugh, but you have to know when to be able to stop to accentuate that. Otherwise, it's just candy floss all the time. You're not bringing in any of the other flavours.
Very good, very good. Gosh, we could talk all day. I'll give you a couple more questions, and I'm going to ask you to maybe do a song, Silky. That would be nice. Do a little song for us. Okay, so give me a quick tip then, and then you can do a song, maybe to finish if you want. Can you tell her, how do you make someone who, they come to your course and they say, I'm not very funny? How do you draw out something?
Well, by listening to what you've just said there, and listening is the key. You said, I'm not very funny. So I'm going to lay that bare. You've said that you are capable of being funny, but on some sort of linear scale from about as funny as bone cancer to wet your pants in public hilarious. You're somewhere on that scale, but you don't think you could do it professionally. You said you're not very funny. Well, okay, no one's expecting you to be very funny. Bill Withers said you can't get to wonderful without passing through all right. And no one's expecting the finished article. No one's expecting that finished product. No one's expecting you to be an audience with Victoria Wood. No one's expecting...
Yeah.
Genuinely, having seen professional speakers, no one's expecting any humour. So you don't have to be very funny to stand out. You can just be a bit funny. You can be enough funny.
Vaguely humorous. Yeah, that'll do, won't it? If you can raise a smile rather than a belly laugh, that's a good thing, isn't it? Yeah,
it's a start. But the thing is, it's a process as well. And if you don't think you're very funny, then it's my job to change that. Because you might not be the best at zinging one-liners. I'm not the best at zinging one-liners. You might not be the best at silent comedy. But I'm not the best at silent comedy. You might not be the best at great big stories with 34 characters and all the different voices and acting out the worst thing that ever happened to you with all these beautiful loops like Billy Connolly, but I'm not the best at that. It doesn't matter that you're not the very best, because no one's ever been you before and no one will ever be you again. And all the experiences that went into making you are unique. So you don't have to be very funny. You just have to have a little bit of faith in the fact that if you talk to people who are there to listen, then with practice, you can improve how you come across. And humour is a really good way of shortening the distance between two people.
Love it. Fantastic. Silky, how can people find out about yourself, get on your mailing list and find out about your online comedy and improv courses? How can they do that, Silky?
They can go to silkythecomedian.com and there's good links on there. They could email laughatleeds@gmail.com if they're interested in the comedy courses, or just Google Silky the Comedian. Great. Don't go to silky.com. That is nothing to do with me.
No, it sounds a bit dodgy. But there you go. So silkythecomedian.com, all the stuff is there. Silky, it's been great to chat to you. Let's finish with a little song or something, shall we? That'll be a good bit of fun. So I do really recommend Silky's courses. And then because they're now online, anyone from anywhere can be part of that. So definitely have a look. silkythecomedian.com. Thank you, Silky. Take it away, my friend.
You are very welcome. You are very welcome. Now, I haven't prepared anything, so I'm not quite sure what to do here, but what would you like? What do you fancy?
Just a short little funny something. I don't know. Whatever you like, mate.
Oh, okie dokie.
If it's rubbish, we'll edit it out, so it'll be fine.
The interview just ends there. Terry's just done a backflip over the houses by the railway line. Terry's just done a backflip over the houses by the railway line. There's all this copper cable lying around. There's got to be a quid in that. I heard something about 700 volts. I don't want them, so I took my axe and I gave the cable just one whack. Now Terry's just done a backflip over the houses by the railway line. Stealing trackside cable might not be the career plan you'd hoped for. And now your shoes are there with smoke coming out of them. He's left all his wee and poo here and 2 clouds of steam that smell like eyes. Terry's just done a backflip over the houses by the railway line. Thank you.
Poor Terry. Poor Terry. Thank you very much, Silky. We'll see you next time on Get Good at Presenting the podcast. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Take care, Lee. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Get Good at Presenting podcast with your host, Lee Jackson. If you'd like to know more about Lee's work as a motivational keynote speaker and presentation coach, visit his website at leejackson.biz. That's leejackson.biz.